Okay, it looks like we're live. If you're watching this, thank you very much. Appreciate it. A lot to say, hard to know how to say it, but there are things that have to be addressed, and we'll get to that. No airs and graces today, as you can see. Didn't bother to put on makeup, barely did my hair. It's just not that kind of day. Anyone who's followed this channel for a while knows that I love my country, I love the people, and I have great respect for anyone who is making an honest, earnest effort to try to uplift people, who's concerned for their welfare, their long-term happiness. And theological disparity, disagreements over political policies, any of that, that doesn't matter as much to me, especially as time goes on, because the fabric of that holds people together, the fabric that connects people to one another in a society, that matters. We would have technical difficulties, wouldn't we? But before that rude technological little blip, there are things that matter so much more than the things that we fight about on a daily basis. It really matters if people are willing to at least go in a common direction, and it matters how people do it. Charlie Kirk, whatever you thought of him personally, whatever you thought of his politics, he wanted to engage with people through debate. He wanted to engage in the political process. He wanted things to be civilized because he had great fears of what happened if people stopped talking to one another. He's been on the record many times of the horrible things that can and do happen in societies when people stop talking to one another. And yesterday, despite him being a very normal person, a very normal family man, who had, let's be honest, very normal opinions that wouldn't have been exceptional in the slightest 5, 10, even 20 years ago. He was very, very normal. And that's the person that some lunatic or group of lunatics, it's not quite clear at the moment, decided to take out. 2 children, left without a father. His wife is now a widow. They were there. Had you heard that? They were there when it happened, in the tent. Apparently, from what I understand, his family didn't always go with him to these events, but they were there that day. And what really, really got to me this morning was when I heard that his little girl had been alarmed by the scary noises, and she tried to run to her father. She's 3 years old. She heard scary noises. It worried her, and she tried to run to her daddy, and she didn't understand that someone had taken her daddy away from her for forever. Such an awful thing. He's not going to be there for her, or I'm not sure if his younger child is a boy or a girl, but I think it's a boy. He's not going to be there for their milestones. He's not going to watch them grow up. When they become adults, marry, have children of their own, they'll have not memories of their own. They'll have memories that other people have. I'm sure their mother and family will talk about their father all the time. When they get older, if they want to investigate his body of work, they'll be able to see for himself what he had to say. But it won't be the same. It won't be the same as if he had been there to raise them. For people outside of his family, this is also a loss because, as I mentioned earlier, he was a very normal guy with very normal opinions. For the most part, I found him fairly compatible with my own worldview. He, there is great theological disparity, but, he can do what he likes in church. I can do what I like at ritual, and I don't think he would have interfered with me, and I wouldn't have interfered with him. He just wanted a good world, and he wanted America to live up to the best of what it can be. There's a lot of people coming out on the woodwork who are saying how their kids or their spouses were in the habit of listening to him and they didn't realize, they didn't know that he had had an impact on them. He was very in tune with young people, reached them better than perhaps any influencer that I'm aware of did. They looked up to him like older brother or favorite uncle. Some of them, I think he was almost a de facto father figure to them. He gave them a sense of self-worth, a sense of purpose, and a roadmap for what you can do in your own individual way to try to bring about beneficial change to the world, about the value of living with moral integrity and the value of caring about things that matter over the long term. And what the people who are celebrating his death, which is a truly sick thing to do, what they don't realize is not just what a moderate figure he was and how unjust accusations of Nazi this and fascist that, which is when people throw that out, all it means is that they don't like that person. Very rarely does it actually refer to anyone who actually holds such political views. But they threw it at him as a slur because they knew it would get people upset. And now there are people rejoicing that the worst has happened. What they do not take into account is that he was a de-radicalizing influence on the political right. He was a de-radicalizing influence amongst young people, and he was stabilizing people. He was an organizer. He worked very, very hard, and he kept people focused and engaged with the process that existed. He wasn't an advocate for burning it all down or anything of that kind. It is extraordinarily dangerous for him to have been taken. But that is what it is now. And people have been discussing on social media, at least where I'm at, about how this just hits a little bit different. We've had a lot of horrific examples of violence. We've had attempted assassinations, multiple on the president. We had the assassination that Luigi Mangione carried out. We've had horrible school shootings. We've had that terrible attack on the children at that Catholic church recently. We had that poor Ukrainian girl, I think her name was Irina, who was just murdered in this cold, mechanical way for no reason, just on her way home from work. An actual legitimate refugee from war, just trying to be safe, and she wasn't here. And just as people were really reeling about that, because there's been a lot of justified anger over her death, not only because it was a senseless killing, but also because of the way the media kept it under wraps for so long, didn't want to talk about it, didn't suit the narrative, not concerned about the truth, not concerned about talking about actual crime and whether or not people are actually guilty of things. No, they're not worried about that. They're worried about vehicles for the narrative, and that didn't fit. And when people looked at her, they saw every woman in their life that they love. And when I looked at her, I thought, if I had had children early in life, or at all, could have been my daughter that was killed in that way. I've always been fairly fearless. I roam the earth. I go where I please, when I please. And I was raised in a world when that was a little bit more possible and not quite so reckless. And now these days, it seems like everyone has to have their head on a swivel at every time. And even if you do, sometimes it isn't always enough. I saw the video of her death unedited. I saw the video of Charlie Kirk's death unedited. I didn't want to look at any of that. But I decided it was necessary to see, because a society that doesn't understand the horror of terrible things that happen is never going to have the energy and the resolve to face it and to support the people in power facing and resolving these issues and trying to establish some sort of justice. We have to be willing to look at the horrible things, call them by their right names, and deal with it as adults. We can't think so much of our own delicate sensibilities. We can't think about our nerves. We can't think about how this will hurt and haunt us. We cannot think about that, and we cannot permit it to be the most important consideration, because it is up to those of us who are of adult years, of whatever generation, to face evil and oppose it and do our part in trying to get things back under control, trying to do something constructive and worthwhile. The kids who come after us, they are depending on us to do our part. And I know a lot of people in the prior generations did not do their part for us. I don't excuse them, and I do not forgive them for that. And I do not forgive them for the way how some of them just refuse to acknowledge the realities of our world. They have their worldview, they have their ideas of how things ought to be, and they think it's the only way, and they are completely out of touch with the realities of what is taking place in the world. But we can't be worried about our wounds and what they left us with. We have to be willing to face things ourselves. What happened yesterday, it really did feel like a turning point. The world feels very, very different today, and I didn't even follow his content all that closely. He was, I have kind of a revolving door of content creators that if they're talking about something of interest or they're having an interesting debate or whatever else, I'll tune in. But it wasn't one of my regulars, but I felt this, and it's not just because I saw what happened. It's because of what he represented. It's because it's the long series of things that have gone wrong, violent attacks that have happened in our country because people decided that morals and virtue didn't matter. It felt like, and it still does, that there was the world before this happened, and now there is the world after. The last time, well, there's been a few times in my adult life that I felt that. First time was when I was 19, on 9/11. The planes hit the trade towers, all the fallout that's happened from there. I knew that the world I had been raised in, the world I had been prepared to face, everything I had been told about how to conduct life and why, a lot of it was no longer valid because that was a world that no longer existed. And people of my generation have really struggled trying to find their way. There's been the periodic financial collapses that have plagued the past few years. Those have been rough. Those have been moments where you really felt like you had to reorient your expectations on life because you weren't necessarily going to be turning things around the way you might have thought you could before. And then, of course, COVID. COVID was whammy that hit the whole world. Has there ever been a time in human history where everything just shut down like that? Ever a time when people were huddled indoors and told to be frightened of everything, of each other, of themselves, of threats they could not see? Has there ever been another generation of young people who, when they should have been celebrating their graduations or the young ones celebrating their first years at school, to where all that was stolen from them? What about the consequences of that? That was a big one. That was a turning point. That was a change. Yesterday was too. We have to prepare ourselves for the very real possibility and probabilities that whatever normal world that we have in our head that we've been longing for, that's something we have to let go of. The actions that may be required to set things straight may be things that even a few years ago we wouldn't have been very comfortable with. But I suggest that we make our peace with that now. Avoid the season rush. The other thing I want to make mention of was what I first heard and then later confirmed. There was apparently an article in Jezebel in which someone claimed that they had bought curses from Etsy witches to hex Charlie Kirk in particular. And of course, they've since backtracked, saying, no, it was only meant to be a bit. It was supposed to be just fun. It wasn't serious and all this and that. I don't know if the article was just making that claim because they thought it would get a little rise out of people or not. I don't know if these Etsy witches existed. I don't know if they actually are put themselves in the business of selling ill will out to put into the universe. I don't know. What I do know for sure is that that is what is now the impression being given. What I do know is that there are plenty of people who will believe it because it confirms all their worst fears, and they now feel more justified in their prejudices against us than ever. I know there are potential consequences for us coming from this. And I know it doesn't just endanger practitioners of the craft, it endangers pagans more generally. I condemned this thoroughly last night, and I certainly condemn it this morning. I have been warning for over 10 years about how recklessly dangerous unethical practices are, about how it is wrong and it should be opposed for anyone who practices any kind of magical tradition whatsoever to go around throwing out curses and hexes and jinxes and anything else. I told them it was dangerous. I told them there will eventually be consequences for this. And that it wouldn't just be them that faced it. It would be the people who told them not to do that sort of thing. And the defense I heard for years on end, and relationships that I lost over these arguments. People said, oh, witches in the old days used to do this sort of thing. I can do it if I want to. I have the right. I have heard people make that argument. And they had no answer when I told them just because it happened in the past didn't make it a fucking good idea. Meting out that kind of ill will is the most serious of actions to be taken. It is one thing if you have been the victim of a crime and you throw out a curse because you want to make sure that whoever hurt you in that crime is brought to both human and divine justice. That is one thing. It is another to do it because you don't like someone, or you disagree with their politics, or because you can't be bothered to take your head out of your own ass and look beyond the narratives fed to you by legacy media who wants you to be nothing more than an automaton for their political agendas, and just act in accordance with that. This is a reckoning. This is a reckoning for the kind of witches who would approve of something like that. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't know if the claims made in that Jezebel article are true or not. I don't know if they really did that. I don't know if there's anyone on Etsy really doing that. But I sincerely hope there isn't. And I sincerely hope there's a loud cry saying, no, this is not who we choose to be. We don't curse people because we disagree with their politics. We fight it out in the usual process. What's worse is that a lot of these people who talk again about how they curse this and they hexed that, I don't know that I really believe any of them are capable of doing that, or that they can tell the difference, because some of them will claim that, they have, approval from this deity or that. I don't believe it, because I don't think these people can distinguish between their own personal wishes and the wishes of the gods. I don't think they can distinguish between thought forms, which are batteries, and the actual gods themselves. But what I do know is that even a kitchen table witch like me, who only has a thimbleful's worth of talent, can bring this sort of thing to the gods' attention, and can make it clear that I'm concerned about the survival of our kind and the survival of the pagan people in general, and how this undoes a lot of goodwill, a lot of neutrals, and it increases hostility towards us, and that all the work the gods have been putting forth for generations now to bring this back from extinction has been placed in jeopardy. And you know what? I think the gods do care about that a great deal. I laid this at their feet last night, and I will continue to do so until things feel resolved. So bear that in mind. Hello to Brandy. Thank you for tuning in on a sad day like this, and it's not exactly one of our usual live streams, is it? No fun topic today, I'm afraid. But sometimes I think it's important just to reach out to community, create a place where people can sit and talk and share what they think. I mean, the fact that this happened at all was because someone gave up on talking. And there's a lot of people celebrating today who have also given up on talking and not interested. They want their way, they want their view of the world. They don't even realize how damaging and how dangerous it really would be if they had the world of their desires. And there's a lot of people out there that don't see how in both pagan and Christian religions there is this emphasis on virtue. You can't read the Havamal or the Celtic triads, the philosophers, without seeing how people were properly concerned with what does it mean to be a good person, and what does it mean to be a protector in your society instead of someone who wants to destroy it and tear it all down. Evil is a real thing that does exist, and some people, they choose it. There are some people who let it eat away at their souls until there's nothing left. A couple, I want to say weeks, maybe a month ago, there was a conversation I was part of on social media. And it's a topic that comes up from time to time. And someone was expressing concern about how there just seems to be, it was as if the soulless walk amongst us. And it just seems like there's a lot more of them than usual. And I'm forced to agree that does seem that way. I don't think these are necessarily individuals who, their bodies were born, but no one chose to incarnate into those bodies. I don't think it's so much that. I think it's the consequence of radicalization. I think it's the consequence of people embracing very destructive, particularly self-destructive ideologies. And I think it's just gradual wearing down. We know that if our bodies come into contact with poison, that especially depending on what it is, that there's only so much before our body is just not going to be able to handle that. It's not going to be able to excrete it or get rid of it in any way. The body will succumb. What isn't talked about nearly as often and really, really should be in this day and age is that there is such a thing as poisons of the soul, and how much poison can a soul absorb before the soul succumbs. I don't have an answer that we can measure for that, but don't you think we should at least be giving that some consideration? What about for the normies? I mean, at least for us in the pagan world, we understand that meditation in any form, part of its function is to get rid of that poison, of our ways of confronting our fears and of standing up to evil, that these are all ways of getting that out of our systems. We have tools. We have an understanding that it needs to be done. What about for the normies who don't have any kind of conception? What I really am concerned about is that right now, the people who want to get better and make themselves better and have a world worth living in, they're doing what they can to comfort themselves and others during this time. And then there's everyone else who's chosen something different. They've chosen the destruction, they've chosen the chaos, they've chosen the fires. It makes me very thankful that several years ago, the Norse god Loki came into my life. And one of his primary lessons to me was about learning to ride the tides of chaos, of knowing when you can't save something, and knowing that you have to focus on survival and adaptation until the storm passes, those waves calm, then you can get to shore, then you can rebuild. I'm so thankful to him for that. I knew there was purpose when he first came into my life, and this is part of it. He was helping me steel myself in advance. I've been thinking about the Celtic goddess Brigid and the importance of building up our homes. I've been spending a lot more time with her in meditations and in rituals for healing, for strength, and to find it within myself to carry on and put a brave face to the world. So easy to be a coward. It's so easy to give into hysteria and emotions and all of the worst possible things. But you know what? The moment someone stands up and says, I'm going to speak in public, I'm going to advocate for what I believe, I'm going to try to give people something to hang on to so they can have strength themselves, you no longer have the luxury of public collapses. Not ever again. I've been thinking about the goddess Nemesis and hopes that retribution will be swift and that it will be decisive. Thinking a lot about that. And another thing that's just been on my mind is what's next? What's next? Hello, Matthew. Matthew says more and more people in recent times have had less and less regard for human life. Ironically, I've seen this in the pagan community, despite reverence for life being a core aspect. I thank you for bringing that up. This is a manifestation of spiritual sickness. And while we have tools to help heal ourselves from spiritual sickness, we don't have any special immunity from it, as we've all had occasion to see. But those of us who know better and those of us who have resolved to do better, we have to keep on. We're going to be seeing, I think, in the very near future, the difference between people who label themselves pagan and people who actually are. It's easy to call yourself something. I mean, you can call yourself anything. and a lot of people won't bat an eyelash. But when it comes to walking the walk, that's always a different matter. And it is terrible to see this in our own communities because, as you say, reverence for life is a core aspect. Paganism is really born of relationships, our relationship with the land, our relationship with the gods, relationship with our ancestors, our relationships with one another. We have a lot of work to do. And of course, the people unwilling to do it, there's not much we can do about them apart from oppose them. But for those of us who are wanting to build, this is the time to do so. One encouraging thing I did see when I was on X earlier today is that there was a lot of people in the commentary space, part of different communities, whether it was political or social or religious, who were saying that they wanted to declare truces with people that they had had beef with in the past, that they wanted to bury the hatchet, that they at least wanted to come together over a common threat. Because I don't think that we have seen the last attempt at assassination. I hate that, but we have to face reality, and that is the reality. There were people on X and on Blue Sky who were coming up with lists for who they wanted to go next. What a despicable, sick thing that is. But as I said, there were other people who were saying this isn't the time for petty differences or old grievances or overemphasizing the differences and that people like to see, that it was more important to focus upon the common ground that we have, the common vision, hope for the future, and that anyone who loved the country and loved Americans and wanted something better, that this is our tribe, these are our brethren. I have seen a lot of people doing that. I spoke on that myself earlier on X today. I mean, like anybody else, I've had my ups and downs with relationships. There's people I've fallen out with. And I truly do regret that right now. So, anyone else wants to bury the hatchet, or at least unite on a common front against an enemy that just hates anything that isn't itself, well, my email is open. My DMs are open. We can definitely talk. There's just more important things to consider. I think there's a lesson about not allowing the perfect to become the enemy of the good. I think sometimes whenever we are in a space where we're advocating for something, whether it's political change, social change, religious freedoms, anything of that sort, I think sometimes we can become so obsessed with our vision of how we think things ought to be that we lose sight of the other people who are moving in, a healthy direction. And we can allow our disagreements with them to go a bit too far. And I hope the seeds are being sown to do that a bit less. I mean, we'll never be perfect, any of us, but we can at least try and do better. And when we slip up, we can hold ourselves accountable. We can be we could probably all stand to be a bit more responsive to people who have counsel that's kindly meant. And not everyone's going to fail that test. Brandy says, I wish we could find more common ground and work towards a greater good. Me too. That's what I'm trying. I really am. I've talked a lot in recent months about the origins of a lot of American concepts, how they take us straight back to pagan Rome, pagan Greece, pagan Celts and Celtic, pagan Germanic tribes. And so it is. That's all very true. However, in these times, perhaps it would be prudent to acknowledge that there are Christians out there who have embraced those things, even if they may never acknowledge their true source. maybe at least for right now, the important thing is if they embrace common values, if they are willing to work towards that. That might be common ground for now, at least for now. So I hope I hope it's been helpful. The little things that I post here every day on YouTube and on X, the little good morning tribes, and I have, the dates. I make mention of any events, and I have a quotation from a Celtic triad. Pagan wisdom like that is something I really have found invaluable in my own life. I think these are the core values that not only we can live by, but that our ancestors held sacred too. And a lot of the things in the Celtic triads and Hoblaw and everything else, I think these are things that people of any faith could really see the sense and embrace. That's something that I'm going to try to share more of. Brandy says, I so appreciate you continue to post dailies, even though you are terribly busy. Thank you for that. It's been a bit of a time on my end. Been some struggles, to say the least. And as I mentioned earlier, I really try to put on a brave face for you guys here, and I think it's my responsibility to keep doing that. But I also think that it's okay to be honest that there have been challenges. Nothing compared to the challenges of today by any means. But August was a pretty horrific month for my husband and I. Just before very, very late July, he lost his uncle. One of his uncles died. He lived to be a goodish age, but still, it was difficult. There was some controversy in the family, as there always is, and that didn't quite get all straightened out before the end. And he had dementia on top of that, so that was very hard on my husband. And his mom broke her hip at work. And that has been very hard on everyone, especially towards the beginning. Well, we had to take on a lot of responsibility. Now, thankfully, she's healing swiftly, faster than I ever would have imagined for a woman her age. She's 69 years old. I She's talking about going back to work in a few months. We will see. But she's very independent, and when a very independent person is suddenly in a position where they have to accept help from others and are even dependent on others, that creates a lot of stress, and so it is. Another hideous thing that happened during August. The kittens that I mentioned being born on solstice, they fell prey to what's called fading kitten syndrome, and they died. And we buried them at the farm, and it has been absolutely horrible because there was nothing we could do to help them, and we tried everything that we could. There was nothing we could do to stop it, and just nothing we could do. Poor, helpless, defenseless little creatures, and we couldn't help them. From what I understand, it's a common occurrence when for litters that are born in the summer, especially if you get into really hot and humid and nasty, and to the point where my mother-in-law, she used to breed puppies, and she said that back in those days she did everything she could to try and avoid having puppies being born anytime during the summer because it was just more likely to happen. And then in the midst of all of that, My husband, who's been diligently trying to get the farmhouse livable, especially with his mother's injury and his father, who's not in the best of health, not always being in a position to do much to help her or even himself. He's he's been having to work a lot more hours, and then the weather's gotten horrifically hot, and I worry about his health and well-being. And it's just there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of things that I don't have the power or the skill to make right. I don't have the skills to do the heavy lifting because it isn't a matter of just choosing the wallpaper or painting the walls. There's plumbing that needs to be done, electrical work that needs to be done, a lot of things that need to be done. And of the two of us, he's the one with the skill to do it. I can help him when he's working, but I can't just fix it myself. There's a limit to what YouTube tutorials can do. It's been really hard. It's been really hard. And I have, on top of that, just really felt the weight of the entire world on my shoulders of the terrible tragedies that I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, the way some members of our community will insist on making things worse, the general uncertainty of what goes forward, because this is a very fragile moment, a very fragile time. People are hanging on to their composure by a thread. By the time we get to Yule, Samhain, and Mabon, I'm just not entirely confident about what kind of world that's going to be. And I don't say this to frighten or discourage anyone, but rather in a spirit of honesty, in a spirit of prepare yourselves mentally and emotionally and spiritually and in as many practical ways as you can. And really build up those relationships with the like minded, particularly close by to where you live, as much as possible. We all need tribe and we all need in person tribe. It's part of being human. And over the next few years, I think we're really going to find out who our friends are and who they're not. But better that it's our generations having to deal with this than the kiddos, right? Hmm. The one benefit of kind of the preposterous way that my generation was raised, because we're the ones who got our heads really filled with, oh, you can do anything, you can be anything, everything's going to work out just right for you. I believe in you. All of that, what I really see is very toxic reinforcement, because we were given a lot of platitudes, but we were not educated very well. We've had to educate ourselves. We were not taught very well when it comes to practical skills and life skills and social skills. We really were not. We've had to learn things the hard way. But the one benefit of our heads having been so inflated, is that there's a part of our brain that is hardwired to say, I can make a difference. I can make this better. I can do something good. And sometimes I think you really do need that kind of absolutely insane optimism just to carry on, just to keep sowing the seeds. And so, if we can take away anything uplifting from all of this, is that, what kind of world do you think is worth sowing the seeds for? And to understand that you can't rely on someone else to do it for you. Charlie Kirk was sowing the seeds for the world that he wanted, got killed for it. Now other people have to pick up his torch, because you can't trust that this horrible thing won't happen again. Even someone as small and as invisible as me in the public space, anything could happen to me. I could be struck by lightning. There could be some maniac that I encounter when I'm out taking a walk, just getting a breath of fresh air. There could be someone who's been absolutely radicalized, who sees my pentacle and decides that I'm the source of their problems and just getting rid of me would make their day better. These things happen. And we have to face them. And there's a reason why I've always encouraged, from when I began this channel, when I started doing those Wicca 101 video classes, there's a reason why my goal was always to make whoever was watching, whatever video, for whatever purpose, to encourage them to become as independent and spiritually self-sufficient as possible, just in case the internet goes down, in case civilization actually does collapse this time, in case something were to happen to me. You know, not that I'm important enough for anyone to intentionally target, but I mean, what if I finally actually do have a stroke or a heart attack and that takes me out? These things do happen. I'm 44. Something could happen to me. I've always wanted people to know that they were good enough and strong enough and smart enough to learn what they needed to know, to put things into practice, and that they could carry on. And today, I really hope that is something that people have taken away from my work. Brandy says, you are one person who lives thousands of miles from me, but you make a difference in my life every day. I'm very moved. I'm deeply moved that you said that. And I'm very complimented. Thank you, Brandy. I do my best. Matthew said, witches are or should be exceptional at enduring hard times. Yes, we certainly should be. It's why I try not to let myself off the hook with these things. It's why, even when I was taking a break from the daily video content, it's been a break with purpose for a reason. Try to finish other projects, even though it hasn't exactly been going smoothly. That's part of the job description. I think what sometimes people outside the craft don't necessarily realize is that the people who have the capability of practicing the craft, you really are at the disposal of the gods. You're there to be a workhorse, and you'll be tested and you'll be challenged, and you won't be able to say, I don't feel like dealing with this, because that lesson will keep coming up in your face until you've dealt with it. You can't say, I just want to collapse, because that's not what you're there for. That's not what you signed up for. It's a cliche, but that whole Spider-Man quote of, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, even with modest or even minimal power, it still comes with a greater amount of responsibility, because of the role that the fates, the gods, your ancestral DNA. There are things in life that really are not up to us. And it's our job to rise to the occasion. So I try. And I've been giving it a think about where does my duty lie at the moment? What's the most good I can do? What should I be doing? What's not just going to comfort my spiritual brothers and sisters, but what's going to strengthen them? I have a lot to think about and reflect on, and I've certainly been deep in meditations, asking for some guidance about what I need to be doing in this moment. Because I had plans, I had thoughts and ideas, And there have been a lot of events. And to not take those events into uh, consideration and to, well, that would just be foolishness. And few people get punished more thoroughly for foolishness, particularly willful foolishness, than witches. So I am looking for guidance on that for sure. But it's not just witches that are being called to live up to their best of self and to stand up and be counted and to do what they can to forge a better world. That burden is to varying degrees, depending on the person's capacities. It's on everyone's shoulders. When you have a deep sickness in society like we are dealing with right now, it's not just a matter of criminals being punished. It's not just a matter of, well, if we had this policy or that, it's sorted, or if we had this leader that people listen to, or if people were practicing this particular religion, everything would be fine. It's not so simple. Boy, it would be convenient if it was, but it just isn't that simple. The kind of saving that we need is going to begin with each individual taking themselves in hand and saying, I'm not living like this. I'm doing better. I'm going to develop myself, whatever gifts I have, whatever aptitudes I possess, whatever it is that I have to offer and contribute to the world, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that even better. That's something that everyone can do, in or outside of the craft. As for poor Charlie Kirk, I believe that he has been wrapped up in the embrace of his ancestors. I believe that they're looking after him now. I believe that he'll be watching over his family. I think offering his family support and comfort at this time is something that should certainly be done. And I think people willing to pick up the torch to do what they can to build another world, that's another thing that we can be doing. And let the guilty be punished. There has to be consequences. In the craft, we think about consequences all the time, at least those of us who have sense in our heads. The stories that we tell in paganism and the retellings of our mythology, it's all about consequences. Well, there has to be consequences for the lunatics and the violent amongst us. Brandy says, I saw your edit, was the human's experience supposed to be simple? I'm sure not. I'm sure it was not. Ugh. Yeah, I remember back in the days when I was being raised in a Jehovah's Witness family. One of the talking points that they always tried to prepare people at the door was, why do bad things happen to good people? Why does evil exist in the world? Why, et cetera, and so on, everything in that line. And there was never a particularly good, satisfying answer to that. There was, a lot of talking around that the witnesses trained you to do. But for pagans, we actually do have an answer for why bad things happen to good people and for why evil exists in the world. And it is because the, the gods did not create a world without challenge. They have challenges themselves. So their descendants, their creations, however you choose to think of ourselves in relation to them, we have challenges of our own. We make choices. They were born with the history of our ancestry, with a disposition, That's one of the reasons why we look into our natal chart so much to kind of figure out what raw materials we are dealing with. We're shaped by our experiences and we make choices. And we're making choices, each and every single one of us, every single day, about what we're going to do with our own raw materials. That's the test, if ever there was one. And if there's any kind of accountability to be had in the afterlife, I would imagine it's, well, what did you do with your raw material? Because we all have flaws, we all have strengths. We have strengths that can turn into flaws if we misapply them. Wrong thing at the wrong time. My goodness, we have seen so much of that. Earlier today, someone who used to follow me on X was expressing his concerns over mob violence when he saw a video of people who were holding a candlelight vigil. Some asshole drove through that candlelight vigil on a scooter without regard to anyone's safety, saying F Charlie Kirk and, mocking and hating on them generally. And at some point, he got separated from that scooter, and there was a bit of a fight, and this person was all concerned about what people who had been attacked at a ceremony of mourning. He was worried about that. He didn't have any criticism for the person who had disrupted what should have been sacred proceedings. And I suggested that maybe if he wanted to criticize people for getting into a fight, maybe he needed to criticize the person who instigated it. And he said how he had seen mob violence and what it could lead to and how horrible it was. And I let him know, as gently as I could, because he was an older fella, just how tone deaf that was. And that calling people who had gathered for a vigil and who experienced an attack, calling them a mob was an insult. And that I was reproaching him gently to try to bring him back to his senses and think about what's actually going on here and know what time it is and understand the nature of what these events really mean. And reminded him that the next person who he got into a verbal dispute over this was unlikely to have my scruples or my sensitivity towards his feelings or worldview. And his response was to tell me that we were done being an association and blocked me. That was his response. That was him not adapting to the realities of the world. That was him not taking experience into consideration, and that was him not thinking very seriously about consequences and the consequences of our world. There are people who are going to refuse to adapt, and some of them may be our elders who, at the precise moment when all of us would benefit from wise elders sharing their perspective and bringing what calm they can to an explosive situation, there will be some who don't get it and who will be just as useless as the person I just told you about. So it relies, it falls to us with the younger generations again. We have to have higher standards for ourselves than people who choose to be clueless, even in old age. We have to expect more of ourselves than that. That's our obligation. That's our burden. That's our honor. We have to do what we need to make things better and think, be able to look past the end of our own noses, be able to look past our own personal desires and how we would have preferred a cushier, comfier, more convenient life. We need to think about the kind of world we're creating and what we're leaving behind us when we go, because we're all mortal. We all hope to live to a good age. We don't always have that privilege. Charlie Kirk didn't. Matthew says, age is no guarantee of wisdom. That is for sure and for certain. And if and when there comes a time when I am so totally out of touch, I hope I have enough wisdom to know that I'm out of touch and to get out of the way of the younger generation so they can face the challenges that will fall to them in due course. Better standards, higher expectations of ourselves. That's what I'm coming away from. Ooh, I've been talking your guys' ears off. And I'm sorry for the rambling, and I just, last night I tried to write down a few notes of things I wanted to say because I knew I would have to say something about this, particularly when I heard about witches being involved, at least allegedly, about trying to curse prominent public speakers. I knew I would have to do something. That was my duty to speak out on, my duty to condemn it. And I tried to write down some kind of outline this morning, just have a little bit of order and flow and structure to this, but I just couldn't. I just couldn't do that because this isn't the time for, I think, that kind of polish. I think this is the time for humanity. I mean, I didn't even put on makeup. I didn't even dress up. I just wanted to be real and to be human and to have a little bit of space for other people to have to be that too. Because I'm tired of the artifice. I'm tired of pretenses. I'm tired of a lot of things that our world has been shoving down our throats as being the important thing. We need sincerity. We need humanity. We need reality in the worst possible way. So here's reality for what that's worth. Ooh, thank goodness for cats, huh? I would imagine any of you watching, if you're sharing any amount of the concerns that I have today, that you might be holding on to your kitties and puppies a little bit more closely today. Because again, this isn't about mourning someone who we necessarily agreed with, or it isn't about that. It's his significance was his legacy. It was something that was deeper and more important than his own individual positions on things. It's the death of a man who was willing to talk, the death of a man who wanted to settle things without resorting to fists and knives and guns and bombs and everything else. It's the death of a man who was doing his utmost, the best way he knew how, to avert a disaster for our entire civilization. That's what I'm mourning, because there are not a lot of people like that. There's not a lot of people that are looking at what's ahead of us, asking where's the exit ramp, realizing there may not be one. He did the most American thing ever. He started to build one. That was the spirit of our American ancestors. They built it. I want a house. They built it. I'd like a town where I can congregate and trade with other people. They built them. People built. Americans build. I've been thinking about our true character as a culture a lot lately, not only for the podcast, but for the book, but also for my own personal benefit. I think visionaries, adventurers, but builders and rebuilders. We've had disasters before, we've weathered them, and we weathered them specifically because people embodied that spirit. It's broken, I'll fix it. It doesn't exist, I'll build it. It couldn't be done, so I created conditions where it could. That's America. Brandy says the world has been divided over similar people who had a big impact. Yeah, almost almost immediately yesterday after it happened, people were passing around this quote on X about how when the tyrant dies, his reign is over. When the martyr dies, his reign has just begun. He's a martyr. I really do believe that. And I would like to emphasize he's not so much a martyr for his Christian faith, although I'm sure there are people in his religious community who do see that in that particular light, because that's an aspect of what he means to them. But he's a martyr to the American people and to the American culture. He was martyred because those founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, he understood those were expressions of the American character that was coming into being before the nation was founding, before the revolution even. These were the sense of life, not just political policies, but a sense of life, a worldview that led to the revolution happening, that led to the formation of the republic, that has caused people to defend it the best way that they could in their own times. That's what he's really a martyr to in my eyes. I hope we can get past this rough business and live to see the day when his loss isn't just this moment of pain for his family, for the people who admired him, when it wasn't just this loss for what he represented in our culture beyond the realm of politics. I hope we live to see the day when some good can come, when people take his legacy as inspiration, when they say, I would like to be American as opposed to what the opportunist out there would like to transform me into being. I hope we live to see that. I really do. And we can. We just have to work for it. Isn't that amazing how often in these videos that always comes back down to being the answer? Just work for it. You want to conquer the discipline of meditation, work for it. You want to reorganize your house so that you have better energy flow, work towards it. You want a better world, work for it. Work, 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 work. I guess there's just no choice. We have to roll up our sleeves and get busy then. It does, don't we? But that's all I had to say. All I've been rambling about. All I'm left of now is just kind of how it all feels. And I don't have a lot of words for that. So I'll get off here, let you guys go. I hope it's helped at least a little just to sit down and talk these things through. I really do hope that it's helped. If you want to get in contact with me, you can do so at Blackbird Pagan on X, just, the at symbol Blackbird Pagan. Uh, you can reach me at brigantiablackbird@protonmail.com. If you want to reach out to me there. And yeah, just if you need me, you can reach me in those places. Um, of course, comment here if you want to do that, as always. And yeah, we'll figure this out together. We'll figure out a way to move forward. And once I decide the manner in which I can do the most good at this moment, I'll be putting that into action. I think you guys know that I do have a rather impulsive streak in my nature. Whenever I set out to do something, I'd like to do it immediately. So keep your eyes peeled over the next couple of weeks as I decide what that's really going to consist of. Brandy says, I'm sorry you felt so much heartbreak recently. Thank you. Thank you. That I appreciate comfort from wherever it comes these days. I'm definitely not the only person in need of it. I'm definitely not the only person who had difficulties in August and difficulties this past month, as well as just dealing with what's going on in our world and knowing that we can't ignore it. We have to deal with it. I'm definitely not the only person in those shoes. So opportunities to be kind to people, particularly the like-minded, particularly those who we feel connected to, it's going to be very important. And not just in the coming days, but to make it more of a habit. If we want a better world where people act better, it really begins with us leading the way ourselves. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being there for me just now. Thank you for allowing me the chance to try and be here for you. And reach out if you need to. I'll be in touch, guys. Bye for now.